My, Phil. M, M1FFI in ISO HB11HI. S, \BBBS all MVJBHB high hub II high RBFL1F, I, 2 Lyacy. Ilvugio FF Library Theological Seminary Princeton, NJ * case SJNLF book BL 1570.W 54 1843 Wilson, John, 1804 to 1875 The PR's iReligion YC, S pound. T, * SVU. RAP, the PARS1 religion as contained in the Zand Avastá, propounded and defended by the Zoroastrians of India and Persia, unfolded, refuted, and contrasted with Christianity. By John Wilson, D.D., M.R.A.S., President of the Bombay branch of the Royal Asiatic Society, and missionary of the Church of Scotland, Bombay. Theodoratus. The course of argument and fair reason cannot be impeded. Bombay Government. Bombay, American Mission Press. 1843. To the office-bearers and members Bombay branch of the Royal Asiatic Society. Gentlemen, I beg leave to inscribe to you this volume, in token of my gratitude for the kindness and indulgence extended to me while very imperfectly discharging the duties, and supporting the honors, of your chair, and for the warm interest which many of you individually have taken in my labors to disseminate useful, but more especially divine, knowledge among the natives of this great country, whose present social and moral condition, as well as past history, it is one of the principal objects of our society to investigate and unfold. Bombay, December, 1842. I am, gentlemen, yours very respectfully, John Wilson. Preface. The religion of the Parsees, notwithstanding the puerilities and absurdities with which it is now associated, is substantially the same, in its general principles, at the present day, that it was in the ages of antiquity. As that of the united hosts of Medes and Persians, who were providentially instrumental in the destruction of the mighty power of Babylon, and the deliverance of the Jews, the favored depositaries of divine knowledge during the general apostasy of the world from God, who, in the noonday splendor of their reign, ruled over the larger portion of the Greater and Lesser Asia, who attempted to crush the infant liberties of Europe in the Grecian states, who carried their victorious arms to the north of Africa, and usurped for a season the rule of the pharaohs in the land of Egypt, who, after having for centuries succumbed to Macedonian and Parthian rule, recovered their freedom, and first set limits to the Roman Empire in the east, who long formed a barrier to the eruption of the barbarous hordes of Scythians and Huns and Turks, by whom the civilized world was ultimately inundated, and whose signal achievements and failures, from the very dawn of profane authentic record, have so much employed the pen of the historian, it is not without high interest in the history of the speculations and errors of the human mind. It did not form an element in the greatness of its professors, for, except in the circumstance that it discarded the use of the works of men's hands, both as the emblems and special residences of the divinity, it was perhaps inferior in its elements and institutions to the forms of faith professed by at least some of the surrounding nations, but on this very account it merits attention, affording, as it does, an illustration of the almost unbounded scope which the human mind will indolently, or actively, give to the device and practice of vanity, and, one will add, folly and impiety, in connection with its professed intercommunion with the powers of the unseen world. Its internal energy was happily too weak to resist the influence of the Christian teacher in the early ages of the Church, and it called for, and used, the sword, by the cruel hands of the descendants of Satan, to oppose the progress of the truth, till such time as it was foiled, and nearly annihilated, by its own weapon, wielded by the Saracen invader. In the solitudes of Yazd and Kerman, and in the busy scenes of commerce on the western shores of India, it has still a remnant of adherents, to be reclaimed, it is to be hoped speedily, from the vain traditions received from their fathers, by the still small voice of the Gospel, and it is worthy of attention by all who have dealings with them, and especially by those who entertain philanthropic desires on their behalf. Much has been done towards its elucidation by our learned countryman Dr. Hyde, who first made it the subject of an elaborate treatise, by Anquetil du Perron, the interpreter of its sacred books, by Mr. William Erskine, who has taken an oblique survey of its principles as developed both in ancient and modern times, and of the present practices of its votaries in India, by M. Burnouf, whose philosophical and philological research has done so much to facilitate the knowledge of the Zand, preserved only in its own records, by Professor Bopp, a most accomplished and successful preface. Lyry in the same undertaking and, by several other distinguished writers on the continent of Europe. The labors of these men, however, rather invite than repel the farther investigation which they facilitate, and encourage the attempt to present the result of their research in a practical compass. It is manifestly desirable, that the Pars system should be exhibited in the light of Christianity, and it is with a view to aid in this attempt, that I have endeavored to improve the advantages of observation and inquiry which I have enjoyed in connection with my professional duties in Bombay, and contemplated for some time the publication of a general treatise on the tenets and observances of the Zoroastrians, and that with a particular reference to their own improvement. The form which this volume has ultimately assumed, is entirely to be ascribed to the publication of certain works by the Zoroastrians themselves, in explanation and defense of their faith, and in opposition to Christianity, which the benevolence of their well-wishers in distant lands is now pressing on their attention. The circumstances in which the works to which I now refer have appeared, are detailed in our first chapter, and it is only the mere mention of them individually which is here required. The first of them, a quarto of 268 pages, bears the following titles: Talami Zarathustra, or the Doctrine of Zoroaster in the Guzrati language, for the instruction of Pársí youths, together with an answer to Dr. Wilson's lecture on the Vandadad, compiled by a Pársí priest. Min Bombay 1840. C/L/5R/3JTM1CR/NMR, L/*NICFL/NUI. As here mentioned, the work 8 preface is in the Gujarati language, with the exception of some quotations in English, Persian, and Zand, which, however, are uniformly translated into Gujarati. Its avowed author is Dosabai Sarabji, a respectable Munshi, well known to both the native and European communities of Bombay. He is not as a writer a volunteer, but the hireling, as he confesses, of the Pársí Panchayat, or Sanhedrim. His exposition of the Zoroastrian faith, owing to his having found it more convenient to disguise than defend the system, is both brief and inaccurate. He seems to have forgotten the proverb, an Ethiopian is not made white by washing. It is too late in the day for any person now to attempt to resolve the Pársí Ahriman, or evil principle, into a mere personification of the evil qualities inherent in man, and not till the Yajna is wholly disused, shall we believe that the Parsis consider fire nothing more than a kiblut, or center of worship. That Virgin priesthood of which our author is a member, has in its major part discarded his opinions, if we may form a judgment either from public report, or from the work the title of which we now subjoin. £XNNXN on degree TNIHNI $M$XUIOA \C degree TJVSI registered trademark. The literal rendering is as follows: in the name of God the bountiful, the liberal, and the gracious, the book Maljazati Zardosht *, that is to say, the un***ti correct form, though Daster should observe, is either Maljazud Azarliasht or Mavgaz and El Zarayuati. Preface. Doubted Miracles of Zoroaster, complete from beginning to end, with an exposition of the Zoroastrian faith. The author is Dastur Adalji Darabji Idastamji Sanjana. In the year of Yazdijard 1209, and in the year of Christ, 1840. The writer of this work, familiarly known by the name of Idal Daru, is the chief priest of the Rasami, the larger of the two sects into which the Indian Parsis are divided. It has been composed, he informs us, agreeably to the orders, and at the expense, of Jamsetji Bhoi, the opulent and liberal Pársí merchant, on whom Her Majesty lately conferred the honor of knighthood. It is scarcely of a controversial nature, though it states, in the preface, that it has been composed to aid the followers of the good faith in their discussions with the Juddin, or Gentiles, which have for some time been proceeding. Unlike the Tied Limai Zarathustra, it speaks without disguise, and in general without perversion, and in many places it is directly opposed to that work. Its exposition of the principles of Zoroastrianism is pretty copious, and from the situation of the writer as the head of the Pársí priesthood, it is viewed by many as authoritative. Its collection of legends respecting Zoroaster, and his immediate followers, is principally according to the Zarathustra Tendma of Zarathustra Baram, and truly it contains, little else but dreams, conjectures, fancies built on nothing firm. The author, being considered a person of peculiar sacredness, has been living for many years almost in a state of seclusion at the principal fire temple, and he seems, to a considerable extent, to have escaped the untoward march of intellect. It is to his credit that he has preserved his temper throughout his work. It is comprised, I may add, in 127 pages, quarto. 210 preface. 3. The third work, a duodecimo of 347 pages, has two titles. That which is most indicative of its contents, is the Second, inserted partly within the figure of the blazing sun, HMFLHVLC/LHL, which may be rendered, the Narangha of Kalam Kas. A countless number of questions proposed to Dr. Wilson in the Durban newspaper, under the name, signature, of Kalam Kas, are here extracted and published. By some of the respectable Parsis of Bombay, I have been requested not to hold their community responsible for the publication of this book, which they declare to be the production of ignorance and stupidity. I do not see, however, that, in respect of the character ascribed to it, it differs much from its neighbors. But, except when it advances statements, and hints at arguments, not to be found in the other controversialists, I have made few direct references to it. Had the Durban been a proper organ for religious discussion, I might have replied to the artides which it embodies at the time of their appearance. 4. The fourth work appears in Gujarati and English, $IAL3 Janin smug 2 ENGI pound NT5W asterisk 2I% number TLLL the Hadi Gumraha N, or a guide to those who have lost their way, being a refutation of the lecture delivered by the Reverend Dr. John Wilson, D.D. on the Vandadad Sada of the Parsis. By Ispandi R.G. Framji. 1841 it is written, the author informs us, at the special request of Shitjijibhoy Dadabhoy, ESQ, one of the most distinguished patrons and supporters of the Mazdayasna preface. 11. Religion. It contains a running comment on my lecture on the Vandadad, the argument of which it not unfrequently misapprehends and misrepresents. Its appeals to the Zand writings are pretty numerous, but the translations and interpretations made of them are much more inaccurate than those of Ainquetil du Perron, on which, 9 years ago, when I published the pamphlet on which its animadversions are made, and before I devoted myself seriously to the study of the Zand, I was almost wholly dependent for my knowledge of the sacred books of the Parsis. The author, when he finds my arguments insuperable, generally retreats, like Dosabai, into a parabolical sanctuary, which his imagination has called into being as a dernier place of resort for Zoroaster and his foiled followers. In the ruins of this sanctuary, if I mistake not, he has found a place of sepulture. In replying to the works now mentioned, under the different divisions of my subject, intended to embrace the general principles of the Parsi religion, I have endeavored to collect together all the information which they contain and all the reasonings which they advance. I have, in this way, I flatter myself, overcome the disadvantages arising from the want of order on their part, as well as imparted a liveliness to the discussion which it could not otherwise have possessed, however methodically pursued. I trust that my opponents will admit that in dealing with their expression of opinion, I have endeavored to do it ample justice, to give a clear and intelligible statement of it, principally in their own words, and to point out the grounds on which it is made to rest. The Pársí religion, I have set forth, not only as propounded and defended by them and their countrymen in general, but as developed in its own standards, comprised in the Zand Avastá. The whole of the Vandidad, I have perused in the original Zand, having respect to its legitimate meaning, so far as it can be discovered by such a grammatical analysis as the Phi 12 preface. The logical labors of Rask, Burnuv, and Bopp, and a consideration of the analogies to the Sanskrit, which are neither few nor insignificant, have enabled me to make, and by a comparison of the French version with the Gujarati translation, paraphrase, and comment of Fram Jave, the father of Espandi Arji, made under the patronage and direction of the late celebrated Mullah Firas and other learned dasters connected with the sect of the Khatamites, and which latter work embraces the traditional renderings and interpretations of the Pahlavi and Persian Ver-a-Science. Similar course, I have pursued with many of my liturgical pieces. Success, notwithstanding the helps which I have enjoyed, has not been equal to my expectations, and, in common with the Parsis themselves, I have been unable, in many instances, to penetrate the obscurity which rests upon the pages of the Zand. What I have been too read to advance, however, in the following work, rests, I am persuaded, as far as every matter of the least consequence is concerned, on safe grounds. I have throughout adduced a sufficiency of documentary proof, and made a sufficiency of precise references to the recognized sources of information. In my studies during the last few months, I have enjoyed the kind countenance and companionship and able assistance of Mr. N. L. Westergaard of Copenhagen, the author of the Radices Lingua Sanskrito, a gentleman who has already taken a most advanced place among the philologists of Europe, and who will ere long do more than ample justice to the patronage of his sovereign, His Danish Majesty Christian VIII, which has brought him on a literary mission to the East. May I venture in passing, to express the hope that my friend in union with M. Burnouf will soon give to the world a critical edition of the whole of the Zand writings, prepared from the Copenhagen and Paris manuscripts, and those which we are now collecting in India. Preface 13. The body of the Zand writings, T may here remark, is comprised in the Zand Avastá or Zand word, which I have never seen in the hands of the Parsis in a collected form. It consists of the Vandidad, which is composed of the Vandidad properly so called, and the two larger liturgical works, the Asina and Visperd, which are interspersed with it, and recited along with it during the celebration of the most extended service of the Zoroastrians, the Kurta Avastá or me, nor liturgy, theists, and other detached pieces. The Vandidad, properly so called, consists of the report of an alleged dialogue between Ahura Mazda and Zoroaster. In my 6th chapter, I have presented the reader with a complete analysis of the work, and I need here make no attempt to enumerate its contents. The Yajna or Izashni, the grand sacrificial service, is divided into 72 sections, or has. On the first of them, a most able and elaborate comment, forming a large quarto volume, has been published by Professor E. Burnuv, of Paris. Translations of specimens of these will be found in the subsequent pages. The subject of them is the adoration of Hormuzd, and the whole creation, animate and inanimate, said to be affected by him. The Visperd is similar to the Yajna in its contents. Its name indicates its dedication to all the masters, or objects, of purity addressed by the Zoroastrians. It is divided into 27 small sections, or kartas. The arrangement of the Kurta Avastá is attributed by the Parsis to Adarbad Marspand, a contemporary of Shapur, the successor of Ardashir Pabagan. In both the manuscript and printed copies of the work which I have examined, I have observed great differences as to the amount of its actual contents. The following are the pieces found in a C. Urias manuscript belonging to myself, evidently written by the 14 preface. Ghabars of Persia. 1. The benediction, Hashem Vohu. 2. The Ahunavar, Yalhud Ahu Vario. 3. Avastá and Kurdan, the Avastá for bread eating. 4. Avastá Ikame Kardan, the Avastá for shedding urine. 5. Yudman Ilal Unitan, the washing of hands. 6. Kustik a Runitan, the tying of the kusti, or cincture. 7 Avastá and Conchidan, the avasla for paring nails. 8 The 5 Nidishis, or Laodiceans, of Khurshid, the sun, Mater, the dawn, or Venus, Mali, the moon, Atish, fire, and Ardashir, water. 9 The 5 Gas, or offices for the watches of the day, Havan, Rapitan, Osiran, Ivesrutum, and Oshen. 10 Theists, or sacrificial services for the Isids, of Hormuzd, Ardibihist, Sarosh-Hadukt, and the Little Sarosh. 11 The Ndmsitishni, or salutation of the names of Hormuzd. 12. The Afrigans, or delectations, of Daman, Sarosh, the Gahambars, and Rapitan. In the last printed edition of the Avastá, the following additional pieces are found. The Narang, muttering, for taking the water zur. The Hashbdm, or prayer at the dawn. The Dawavispimat, at the Hawan Ghat, the reverencing of all good thoughts, etc. The Jva Masker, or salutation, of the 4 points of the compass. The Paydates, or penitential services, the Pasmani, Irani, and that for departed souls. The Bdj, or muttering at meals, and the Djiparhezwni, the Namaskdrus, or salutations of lamps, Mutad, the Dakamas, mountains, water, and vegetation. The prayer for health. Prayer for the true faith. Theists, Narang Hormuzd, the great Hoftan, the small Hoftan, Kurdad, Awa, Mali, Tashtar, Tir, Gosh, Mater, Narang Sarosh-Hadukt and Ratna, Rashni, Farvardin, Biram, Ram, Din, Arsasang, Zamiad, Horn the greater and smaller, Narang Horn, Wanant, Narang Wanant, Saraza, Narang Ardebahist. The Narangs for the asterisk. This piece is in Polybal and net in Zand. Preface. 15 Relili and occasional offices, that to be repeated after the Niash, after theists, and after instructing children, on cutting hair and paring nails, after the completion of the gauze, by the Nasasals when carrying corpses. The Avast for the happiness of departed spirits. Ing the spirits in hell to repentance. The Avast for lead the prayer to be repeated by the Dasturs at the time of the Barisnam, or great penance. The Narang for consecrating Bikri, the Pahlavi Narang to be stuck on doors on the 12th day of the 5th month. The badges for eating, the greater, ablutions, sleeping, awakening. The Siddham to be read for the dead. The Narang to be repeated the 3rd day after the death of a person. An introduction to the Afrigans. The Afrigans, of Ardafravish, and of the Gaz. The Afrins, or delectations, of the Gahambar the Gahambar, the Ardafravish, the names of the illustrious, Daman, Mayazd, Rapitan. The names of the 7 Hamdras. The names of the 12 angels presiding over the elements. The funeral ceremonies. The Ahunavar for those who cannot read the Zand Avastá. The Ashirvds, or blessings, that of the Paimani Pahlavi, that in the name of the Creator, the Sanskrit, for health of body, and the 5 Gas, separately. Account of clothing a child with the Sadra. The names of the 30 days, 12 months, and 5 Gas. 10 has from the Azashni. A few of these pieces are in Pahlavi and Sanskrit, and some of them are extracts from the larger liturgy. In a large manuscript in my possession, formed principally of the Rawayas, or traditions, I observe many additional prayers in the Zand language, to be used on particular occasions of which the Parsis are now ashamed. They refer principally to the different functions and states of the soul and body. Of the Avastá, several editions, in the Gujarati character, have been published by the Dasturs. 2 of them, noticed in subsequent parts of this work, have Gujarati trans 16 priyas. Lashons accompanying them. That last printed has no translation, and the deficiency is not felt by the Parsi layman, whose devotion consists wholly in the emission of sound. An edition of the Vandadat has been lithographed in its proper character in Bombay, as well as at Paris. The Zand and Pahlavi metallic type which I have used in this work, is the first which has been cast in the East. It is the production of the foundry of the American Mission Peace, an extensive and well-conducted establishment sacred to the diffusion of useful and divine knowledge in India, and at present under the vigilant superintendence of my valued friend and fellow laborer the Reverend D.O. Allen. To the Pahlavi and Persian writings of the Parsis, which I have frequently quoted and described, it is not necessary for me particularly to refer. Should the Parsis be inclined to extend their discussions with me, I shall not be disinclined to bring to public view their ceremonial, with all its absurdities, as it is unfolded in their riwayahs, copies of which I have procured with extreme difficulty. For the translation of the Zarathustra, or legendary life of Zoroaster, inserted in the appendix, and some other curious documents, I am indebted to my friend, Lieutenant E.B. Eastwick, whose high attainments in the Oriental languages, will, I doubt not, continue to he consecrated to the cause of philanthropy. Mr. Abiet Aganur, one of the respected heads of the Armenian community in Bombay, has furnished me with the translation of a curious page from Esnik of the 5th century. For chronological purposes, I have given in the appendix, an abridgment of a part of Sir William Jones' view of Persian history. The system of representing Zand letters which I have adopted * will be liated from the appendix. J*. I may here mention that the difference in the orthography of many of the Oriental words which I have introduced, is owing to the fact that one have had respectively before me the Zand, Pahlavi, Persian, and Gujar and TF representations. Preface. 1. I have now to add, that throughout this work I have most anxiously endeavored to abstain from unnecessarily hurting the feelings of my opponents, and of those who are directly or indirectly responsible for the appearance of their publications. Direct, repeated, and aggravated provocations, I have overlooked, and palpable injuries I have forgiven. I have spoken plainly, that I might not be misunderstood, but, I trust, affectionately, under the persuasion that the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. It is not to the Parsis, as a people, but it is to the errors in which they are in a greater or less degree involved, that I have placed myself in an attitude of hostility. The advancement of the cause of truth, I can freely say, has been my constant and only aim. If I understand aright the present state of feeling in the native community of Bombay, the day is not far distant when many of the Parsis who now question my motives, will accord to me the persuasion of my disinterested desire to promote their welfare. Had not my regard for their interests in time and eternity been powerful and effective, this volume would never have seen the light. For the last 2 years, especially, it has demanded of me an amount of labor by night and by day, such as in ordinary circumstances, I should shrink to attempt to render. When my friends and medical advisers stood around, what appeared to them to be my dying couch, it was my prayer that I might be spared to bring it to a conclusion, and now when in the providence of God, I have seen the accomplishment of my anxious desire, I commit the fruit of my labor to the divine blessing. May it be extensively instrumental in leading the Parsis to embrace the doctrines of salvation, in quickening the prayers and efforts of Christians on their behalf, and in revealing to the natives of India in general the unreasonableness and sinfulness of polytheism, and the idolatry of nature. That a great show of answering my statements and reasonings will immediately be made by numbers of the Parsi Com 18 Preface. Munity, I have not the slightest doubt. The Rana Mazardoshti, a magazine which has been lately commenced for the defense of Zoroastrianism, and the assault of Christianity. And most of the feeble reasonings of which have been already anticipated in this volume, in particular, will not be silent. The Parsis, however, are beginning to distinguish between declamation and criticism, between faithful renderings and appropriate statements, and perversions and misrepresentations. In the Gabuk, edited by Nauroji Darabji, I have of late seen admirable refutations of its contemporaries, and particularly of the periodical which I have now mentioned, and one hope that its able conductor will prove himself, through the blessing of God, to be not only a bold but successful and consistent reformer. Though the state of my health compels me to leave India for a season, I shall not overlook what may be advanced in my absence, and others I trust, will be found who will in due time supply my lack of service. From a distant land I hope to forward for publication in India the substance of this work in Gujarati, for the benefit of those who are ignorant of English. The Parsi community is daily rising in intelligence and enterprise, and under more extended efforts for the diffusion in it of Christian knowledge, and through the operation of the Divine Spirit, we cannot but look for its ultimate, and probably speedy, approach to God through Him who is the way, the truth, and the life. Contents. Chapter I Review of the author's former discussions with the Pársíes of India. And notice of the origin of the late publications in defense of the Zoroastrian faith. Pársí 25 Study of the Parsi religion. Review published in a Bombay period_cal correspondence in the Samachar newspaper on religious inquiry, and the propagation of Christianity. Extracts from pamphlets published by the editor of the Harkara and Vardaman, on the same subject. The religion which has not God as its author should be forsaken. Some of the errors of the Pársí faith admitted. Divine mission of Zoroaster not established by evidence. Motives which lead Christians to seek the conversion of the natives of India. Encouragements to missionary labor. Allusions to the means of salvation. Reprobation and defense of the Bundishni by some of the Parsis. Notice of letters published in the Harkara and Vardaman. The Bible the standard of the Christian faith. Divine and human natures of Christ. Testimony of the apostles of Christ. Prophecies respecting the Savior. Claims of the different sects of Christians to be determined by the Bible. Pársí rule of faith destitute of divine authority. Notice of lectures on the Parsi religion by the author. Publication of a lecture on the Vanditid. Summary of its contents. Criticisms upon it not vindicated by attacks on the Bible. These attacks repelled unsuccessful attempt made by the Parsis to vindicate the Vanditid from the charge of recommending the destruction of a child. Particular circumstances. Endeavors to diffuse a knowledgeoy Christianity among the Parsis. Foundation of the General Assembly's institution. Conversion of 2 Parsi youths. Prosecution of the author on a writ of habeas corpus, i.e. liberty of the converts guaranteed. Notice of the anti-convertii memorial and its reception by Govern Sjo. Contents. Mont effects of the discussions caused by it, and of other proceedings. Publication of various works by the Parsis. The Parsis exhorted to the prosecution of religious inquiry. Notice of irrelevant